What we're going to do now is talk about Year B of the year 2012, the second Sunday of Lent, and the three readings come from Genesis 22, Romans 8, and Mark chapter 9, verses 2 to 10. Just to give a little bit of background on Genesis 22, it's that famous story of the near sacrifice of Isaac by his father Abraham. The story traditionally takes place around 1815 BC. Abraham is a desert sheik, and we could say that Abraham really is the first Jew. If you had to trace Judaism all the way back to the beginning, it would begin with Abraham, Sarah, Rebekah, Isaac, Rachel, and Jacob. And in this story, what's kind of interesting is that Abraham is told by God to sacrifice his only son. And the problem with that is that Abraham and Sarah had been having a very difficult time having children. Sarah was pregnant, or Sarah was barren, and she could not produce children, which means as a woman she really had no value. And she prays to God, and finally becomes pregnant. And after all of that, then Abraham gets this idea that he's supposed to sacrifice his son, who is named Isaac. And Isaac literally means she laughs, because when the angel tells Sarah that she's going to have a son, she actually laughs because it's so impossible. She's beyond childbearing age, she's old, and but lo and behold, she gets pregnant and the child is born. Now what happens is that Abraham feels called to sacrifice his firstborn son, which doesn't make any sense because Abraham also was told that he would be the father of a great nation, and through his son Isaac, all nations would find blessing. So what's this idea of killing his son after all of that work? But he takes his son on a journey for 3 days to what is now considered Jerusalem, the famous Mount Zion. There's a large rock there where legend says that he almost sacrifices his son. And as everybody knows, he's about ready to kill the poor boy. At the last minute, the angel stops him, and then they find a ram in the thicket, and they sacrifice this ram instead. The real idea behind this reading is the idea of transformation, that Abraham enters into the experience as one man, a man who believes that his God is like all the other gods. Notice that Abraham and Sarah don't put up a fight. When they are told to kill their son, that seems to make sense to them. And the reason for that is that most of the gods in the ancient world demanded human sacrifice. And so Abraham is doing what he thought a typical God would ask him, but he learns something new in this experience, and he learns that this God Yahweh is different than all the other gods. This God does not demand human sacrifice. Matter of fact, in the history of Israel from then on, human sacrifice will be greatly condemned. But because of his willingness to trust God, the child is spared, and Abraham becomes the father of a great nation, and the lineage will be carried on to his son Isaac, and then eventually his son Jacob. So, again, the main point of this whole story is the idea of trust and be willing to do God's will, and it turns out to be very, very fortunate for Abraham that he doesn't have to sacrifice his son. The second reading is from Romans chapter 8. The letter to the Romans was probably written somewhere between 56 and 58 AD to a small Christian community that was founded in Rome. It was not founded by Paul, but Paul intended to visit there, and he would write these letters to express his personal opinion on different issues that were arising in the early church. And Paul's letter to the Romans is considered his greatest letter. It's the first letter in the corpus, the collection of Pauline letters, and scholars would say that it's genuinely written by Paul himself. And again, it's about transformation, because Paul realizes as he goes through this letter that there's nothing we can do as human beings to lose the love of God. That the love of God is unconditional, and all our job is to respond to that and accept that. And I thought I'd just share with you one of the greatest passages out of the New Testament from Paul's letter to the Romans, and it goes something like this. He says, "For I am convinced that neither death nor life, nor angels, nor principalities, nor present things, nor future things, nor powers, nor height, nor depth, nor any other creature will be able to separate us from the love of God in Jesus Christ." So that's really the good news in a nutshell, that there's nothing we can do. There's nothing we can do to lose the love of God. The final reading is from the Gospel according to Mark chapter 9, and this is the famous reading of the Transfiguration. And what happens is that Peter, James, and John are taken by Jesus up to a high mountain. We don't know what that mountain is. Traditionally, it's in the north-central part of Israel, which is now called Mount Tabor, but it really isn't a mountain. It's more like a big hill. There's no snow. It's about a 30-minute walk to the top. But in any case, again, they have this very, very magnificent transformational experience. They're up there praying, and all of a sudden Jesus transfigures. His body changes. It becomes a dazzling white. And then Moses and Elijah appear to him. Now, we have no idea how they knew it was Moses and Elijah, but what they're saying here is that Elijah represents the prophets. He's the great prophet of the Old Testament, and Moses represents the law. So what Mark is saying here is that all the law and all the prophets, everything comes together in Jesus. That Jesus is the culmination of all 613 laws of the Old Testament and all the great prophets that came before him. And most dramatically what happens is that as he transfigures, Peter, James, and John are left speechless. And they get, for the first time, this glimpse of the real nature of Jesus. That Jesus is not just a teacher or a rabbi or a preacher, but he is this transcendent Son of the divine. And when he is transfigured, it's an experience that's so amazing they can't put it into words. So Peter, as a spokesman for the church, simply says how good it is for us to be here. That's all he can say. He can't figure it out. It's just this ineffable, amazing experience. So again, in summary, the readings for this second Sunday of Lent are really about transformation.